There is something sitting in your digital shelf right now, a domain you registered and never built, a product you outlined and shelved, a brand you named, maybe even designed a logo for, then quietly moved on from. An idea that felt too early or too risky or just not the right time. And somewhere in the back of your mind, in a folder you barely open, it is still there, waiting. Welcome to Quantum Wealth Lab. Today we are inside the ancestral pattern release, the specific, body-level rewiring that unlocks the value in your dormant assets. The assets that are waiting not because they lost their worth, but because you haven't yet given them permission to be seen. Here is what most people don't know. Stagnant projects don't die. They accumulate value in the dark. A domain you registered 8 years ago may be worth more today than the day you bought it. A methodology you developed and abandoned may be exactly the product a new market is looking for right now. An idea you shelved because you weren't ready may have just found its buyer, someone who has been looking for precisely what you built and walked away from. But here is the part that stops most people cold. They can't sell what they still feel shame about. They can't assign value to what they still experience as failure. Ancestral pattern release is the work of uncoupling the project from the story. The old story says, "This didn't work, which means I failed, which means this has no value." The new story says, "This didn't work for me, at that time, in that form, and that has nothing to do with what it's worth to someone else right now." This episode is for the person who has a graveyard of ideas they've never quite let go of, and a growing sense that something in that graveyard is about to be discovered. Settle into this. What you're about to release has been heavy for longer than it needed to be. You are not the projects that didn't complete. You are the person who generated them. That is a critical distinction. The incomplete project is evidence of creative reach. You saw something, you moved toward it, you built something that didn't exist before. That it didn't reach its original destination doesn't erase the intelligence that created it. If anything, it preserves it in amber, waiting for the right conditions. You are a generator. That is your identity. Not a finisher, a generator. Finishers complete what's already been defined. Generators produce raw material that the world eventually catches up to. Sometimes the world catches up quickly. Sometimes it takes years. And sometimes it catches up in the form of someone else who sees the value you couldn't see anymore because you were too close to it. You are allowed to own that identity without the asterisk of what didn't ship. The domain is not a failure, it is a sleeping asset. The methodology is not wasted, it is a blueprint that hasn't been licensed yet. The brand you built is not dead, it is available. Every creator of consequence has a vault. A catalog of work that either didn't launch, got paused, or moved ahead of its market. The vault is not a shame archive, it is inventory. You are the owner of a vault. Today we start treating it that way. Picture the message. It arrives through an unexpected channel, an email to an address you almost forgot, a DM on a platform you don't check daily, a referral from someone who knew someone who heard you mention it years ago. Are you still the owner of that domain? Are you open to selling the concept? I've been looking for exactly this. Feel what that sentence does to the body. The slight surprise, the recalibration, the moment when something you had quietly filed under over quietly opens back up. And the number they offer. It is not the number you expected when you first built it. It is a different number from a different market moment, informed by a different need. It is enough to matter, more than enough. Because dormant assets are not priced at their creation cost. They are priced at the buyer's need. And when someone needs what you built, the price is set by their urgency, not your history with it. Abundance here is not one windfall. It is the opening of the catalog. One buyout leads to the next inquiry. One sale of a dormant asset trains your financial nervous system that the vault has value, not just potential value, not someday value, but real, present, monetizable value right now. The field around you is populated with assets that are looking for buyers, and buyers are looking for exactly what you have shelved. The ancestral pattern that holds dormant assets in place has a specific behavior. It says do nothing. Wait, maybe later. It is not procrastination. It is a grief response to the original wound of the project not working. The project didn't complete, so every time you look at it, you feel the incompleteness. So you stop looking. The action that breaks this pattern is simple and a little uncomfortable. Look. Open the folder. Find the domain registration. Locate the Google Doc with the methodology. Pull up the Canva files for the brand you shelved. Look at what's there without the story of what didn't happen. And then take one of the following actions. List the domain on a marketplace, Afternic, Cedo, Dancom, with a buy it now price. Send a note to someone in the industry adjacent to your shelved idea. I built something years ago that I never launched. Would you be interested in seeing it? Post a single sentence on LinkedIn. I have a methodology I developed for X that I never published. DM me if that's relevant to you. These are not desperate moves. They are activations. You are simply turning on the lights in a room that has been dark. The buyer you can't imagine right now is searching right now. Not for what you finished, for what you started. Make it findable. Here is the part that heals the relationship with the shelved project. It was never wasted. The time you spent building it taught you something. Maybe it taught you the tools you now use every day on something completely different. Maybe it taught you what you didn't want, and that clarity was the thing that pointed you toward what you do want. Maybe it built a skill that has since become foundational, invisible, assumed, because you no longer remember a time when you didn't have it. The project paid you, not in the way you planned, but it paid. Be grateful for the version of you who started it, who saw something and moved toward it without knowing if it would work. That version of you had a kind of courage that gets underappreciated in hindsight. Hindsight says, it didn't work, therefore the risk was foolish. But you didn't know that at the start. You moved anyway. That's not failure. That is how everything worth doing gets done. And be grateful that it survived. The project sat in a folder for years without being deleted, without being sold for nothing, without being dismissed so completely that it ceased to exist. Some part of you knew it still held something. That quiet knowing was correct. It still holds something. You are about to find out what. The ancestral layer of this pattern runs deep, and it deserves to be named. For many of us, there is an inherited script about the value of unfinished things. Incomplete work was shameful. If you started something and didn't finish it, the cultural message was clear. That reflects something about your character, your follow-through, your commitment. That script was written before the creator economy existed, before the domain aftermarket existed, before the concept of asset monetization extended to ideas, frameworks, and digital properties. The world changed. The script didn't update automatically. You have to update it manually. You are worthy of receiving money for something you started and didn't complete, not as consolation, as compensation. The work you put in has value independent of whether you crossed the finish line. The domain you registered at the right moment. The methodology you developed during a phase of deep expertise. The brand identity you built for a market that has since matured. These are assets, not consolation prizes. Let yourself receive an offer for your Stagnant project with the same grace you would receive any other payment for your work. You don't apologize when someone pays you for a completed project. You don't need to apologize for this one either. You built something, someone wants it. That exchange is clean. Step into the version of you who has completed at least one buyout. Something shifted after that transaction that had nothing to do with the money, though the money mattered. What shifted was the orientation toward your own creative output. You stopped seeing unfinished things as evidence of inadequacy and started seeing them as inventory in various stages of ripeness. Some are ready now. Some need another 6 months. Some will find their buyer in 3 years when the market finally catches up to the idea. That future self holds their creative output differently. They complete what they can, ship what's ready, and hold the rest as portfolio, not as baggage. They revisit their domain portfolio annually and make deliberate decisions: renew, develop, or sell. They keep a running list of their shelved methodologies and position one or two of them for licensing conversations each year. This is not a fantasy about passive income. It is a structural shift in how you relate to your own intellectual property. You are the owner of a portfolio. Some of it is active, some of it is dormant. All of it has value on a long enough timeline. You are allowed to step into that version of yourself now. You don't have to wait for the first buyout to start acting like someone who manages a creative portfolio. The posture creates the result. What you hold is worth holding with intention. Let's bring everything back to the pattern you came here to release. The ancestral script that said incomplete equals worthless. That said the gap between what you built and what you launched was a character flaw, a financial waste, a closed door. That script has been running quietly in the background every time you opened that folder and felt the familiar weight of it. Today we close that loop. Not by denying that the project stalled, but by completing the circuit differently. The project stalled in its original form. And in the years since, the world shifted, markets matured, buyers emerged, and the gap between what you built and what someone else needs narrowed to almost nothing. You are a generator with a vault. The vault is inventory. Inventory has value. And value finds its buyer when you stop hiding the inventory behind shame and start holding it in the light long enough for the right person to see it. Identity, you are not defined by what didn't complete. Abundance, the message is already forming in someone else's drafts. Action, turn the lights on in the vault. Gratitude, the building of it paid you even before the sale. Worthiness, the exchange is clean. Future self, you manage a portfolio, not a graveyard. The Stagnant Project was never dead. It was dormant. And dormant is the word we use for things that have been quietly gathering energy, waiting for the season to change. Your season is changing. Until next time, keep expanding. Here is the one thing I want you to do in the next 24 hours. Find one dormant asset. One, a domain, a half-finished product, a methodology you developed and never shared, a brand identity sitting in a Canva account, a framework you taught in a workshop and never wrote up. Write its name down, then write a single sentence underneath it that completes this prompt. The right buyer for this would be someone who needs to. Finish that sentence. That sentence is your listing description, your DM, your LinkedIn post, your pitch. Everything you need to activate the asset is in that one sentence. If you can't think of the right buyer yet, that's fine. Post the sentence here in the comments. The community, which includes people from dozens of different industries, may see the fit you can't see yet. This has happened before. It will happen again. Subscribe for the full protocol library. Each episode is one more layer of the ancestral financial rewiring that changes not just your beliefs, but your behavior, your decisions, and eventually your accounts. Leave a comment with today's community question. What is one dormant asset you've been carrying that you're ready to put in the light? Name it. Even just naming it in a comment begins the activation. You'll feel it shift. Until next time, keep expanding.